Imagine a man who walked alongside kings, who dined in the grandest palaces on earth, who wore military medals on his chest and smiled for 1,000 cameras, who shook hands with presidents, with billionaires, with men whose names appear in history books. Imagine a man who, for 40 years, was untouchable. Not because he was good, not because he was wise, but because of 3 letters that followed his name, because of the blood that ran through his veins, because of a mother who loved him more than she loved the truth. His name is Prince Andrew. And this is the story of how a family, the most powerful, most scrutinized, most celebrated family on the planet, chose, again and again and again, to look the other way. This is not gossip. This is not rumor. This is 25 years of documented silence, and the moment that silence finally broke. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to the beginning. Prince Andrew Albert Christian Edward Windsor, born 1960, the 3rd child of Queen Elizabeth II, and by every account, the one she adored most fiercely. He was charming. He was confident. He served in the Falklands War and came back a hero. He walked through the world with the absolute certainty of a man who had never once been told, truly told, that he was wrong. And why would he be? He was a prince, the son of the most famous woman alive. From the moment he took his first steps on a palace floor, the world bent itself around him. He married Sarah Ferguson in 1986, a wedding watched by hundreds of millions. They divorced 10 years later, but the story didn't end there. In some ways, it was only just beginning. Because after the divorce, after the cameras moved on, Andrew was given a new role, a prestigious one, the United Kingdom's special representative for international trade and investment, a trade envoy, a man who would carry the royal name into boardrooms, into embassies, into the private offices of the world's most powerful men. It sounded honorable. It sounded like service. What it actually became was something else entirely. Historian Andrew Looney spent years trying to understand the full picture. He interviewed diplomats. He spoke to police officers. He tracked down civil servants who had watched, firsthand, as the trade envoy used his position in ways that made their blood run cold. What emerged from those conversations? What filled the pages of his book, entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, was not a portrait of a wayward prince who made a few bad decisions. It was a portrait of a man who had been operating a parallel life, for decades, in plain sight. Andrew was passing sensitive diplomatic and commercial information, state-level information, the kind entrusted to him because of his royal position, to private individuals who were personally funding him and his lifestyle. Meetings were arranged in secret. Business was conducted not at official residences, where everything would be logged and witnessed, but at embassies, where the oversight was looser and the paper trail thinner. Diplomats told Looney they had kept lists, actual written lists, of people Andrew should never be allowed to meet. Men whose money came from sources that raised serious questions. Men whose interests had nothing to do with Britain and everything to do with themselves. Andrew ignored the lists, every time. £5 million. That is what he reportedly accepted as a personal commission for connecting a Greek water company to business opportunities in Kazakhstan. Not a British company, not British interests. A private deal, a private payment, conducted under the cover of his public role. And for years, for long, comfortable, protected years, it worked. Because nobody with the power to stop it wanted to look too closely. There was Sarah Ferguson being caught on camera, selling access to Andrew in exchange for cash. He kept his role as trade envoy. There was the unexplained £1.3 million that surfaced in the Selman Turk money laundering case, a Turkish millionaire charged with misappropriating funds, with Andrew's name floating somewhere in the background. The dial barely moved. And then there was Jeffrey Epstein, the name that changed everything. Andrew's relationship with Epstein was not a passing acquaintance. It was not a photograph at a charity event. It was a sustained, repeated, deliberate association with a man who was running one of the most horrific criminal networks in modern history, a network built on the trafficking and abuse of young women. When the Epstein files were finally released, the documents that the world had been waiting years to see, they confirmed, almost word for word, what Looney had already written. Conversations about the Royal Bank of Scotland during the banking crisis. Sensitive financial intelligence passed to private investors. Names that should never have been in those rooms, in those meetings, on those trips. All of it in black and white. Finally out in the open. And the world asked, how did nobody stop this sooner?
It does sound, reading between the lines, as though we are being prepared for not much happening, actually, on the Andrew front. Without being unduly cynical, that's the impression I'm beginning to get. What do you think?
That clip, let those words sit for a moment. The narrative is being created. Not discovered, not uncovered. Created, deliberately constructed. Carefully shaped by people with enormous power and an enormous interest in making sure that what happens stays buried. Because here is the question, the real question, that cuts through all of this like a blade. Who knew? Not just the journalists who picked up fragments over the years. Not just the diplomats who kept those lists and watched them be ignored. Not just the civil servants who saw things they were never supposed to see. Did the palace know? Did the Queen, that woman described in every royal book ever written as deeply wise, deeply conscientious, utterly devoted to the institution she served? Did she know what her favorite son was doing in her name? And if she did, what does that mean? What does it mean for a family that has built its entire existence on the idea of duty, of service, of standing for something higher than personal interest? If the answer to that question is yes, the evidence, as Looney presents it, is deeply uncomfortable. Policemen being reminded, quietly, carefully, with no direct threat of their confidentiality obligations. Civil servants being made aware of what their pensions depend upon. Witnesses who were ready to speak, who had made contact, who were engaged and willing, and then, after accepting appointments or positions connected to the royal household, went completely silent. Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, one of the most senior political figures in recent British history. He reached out to Looney immediately. He was ready. He had something to say. Then he was given a role in the new government. And he said nothing more. Now perhaps that is a coincidence. Perhaps a busy former prime minister simply became too occupied with his new responsibilities to follow through. Perhaps. But it is a coincidence that keeps repeating. People who were about to speak, who had reached out, who were engaged, and then the door closes. The phone goes silent. The email chain ends. This is how powerful institutions protect themselves. Not with guns, not with overt threats, with systems, with structures, with the quiet, persistent application of pressure that never has to be spoken out loud because everyone already understands what is expected of them. 5 years of Freedom of Information requests, trying to obtain the guest lists from Andrew's official trips. Who was on those planes? Who sat across from him at those dinners? Were Epstein and his associates among them? Every request was blocked. Health and safety, national security, exemption after exemption. The most creative interpretations of bureaucratic process deployed with extraordinary consistency to ensure that the public never found out who was actually traveling at the taxpayer's expense alongside a man who was selling access to state secrets. The information exists. It is in government files, and it is being kept deliberately from the people who paid for those trips and who deserve to know the truth. And then there is the woman who has disappeared. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, once one of the most photographed women in the world, bold, loud, controversial, irrepressible. The woman who made a spectacular comeback after every scandal, who somehow always managed to land on her feet, who turned personal crisis into television deals and book tour and charity work. She is many things. Andrew Looney, who actually met her, describes a woman of genuine warmth, real empathy, the kind of person who can make you feel, in the first 5 minutes, like the most important person in the room. She is also a woman who visited Jeffrey Epstein's homes regularly. Long after she had publicly announced she had cut off all contact with him. Long after the world knew who and what he was. She is a material witness. The United States Senate has made clear they want to speak with her. British police would also very much like a conversation. Nobody knows where she is. She vanished, quietly, efficiently, without drama, which is, in itself, quite remarkable for a woman who has never been known for quiet efficiency. when Andrew was arrested in February, when police moved on the story, when the Epstein releases began and names started surfacing, Sarah Ferguson simply ceased to be publicly visible. People who know her say she will resurface eventually, that she has survived too much, reinvented herself too many times to simply disappear forever, that there will be an interview somewhere, a carefully managed conversation, a version of events shaped by very expensive lawyers and very experienced publicists. But here is what matters. Here is what all the carefully managed interviews in the world cannot change. She was there, she knows what happened, and until she speaks, properly, honestly, under oath if necessary, a crucial piece of this story remains deliberately incomplete. The Department of Justice in the United States has released only a fraction of the Epstein files. Co-conspirators have done quiet deals with prosecutors and faded from the headlines. The full picture is being parceled out slowly, strategically, in ways that seem designed less to reveal the truth and more to manage the damage to the people who still have power. And the women, the actual victims, the ones who were trafficked, abused, whose lives were shattered by what Epstein's network did to them, they are still waiting, still hoping that the word justice means something more than a headline. There is something almost surreal about watching a royal visit after all of this. The motorcades, the carefully pressed uniforms, the children waving small flags, the speeches about community and service and the values that bind a nation together. All of it still happens. All of it still draws crowds. All of it still means something, genuinely, to the people who line those streets. But somewhere in those crowds, now, there is always someone who is thinking something different, asking a question that didn't used to be asked so openly. A question that the institution, for all its centuries of survival, has never faced quite so directly. What did you know, and how long have you known it? The monarchy has always understood one fundamental truth about power, that the moment people stop believing in you, it is over. Not legally over, not constitutionally over, but over in the way that actually matters in the hearts and minds of the people whose belief is the only thing that makes any of this real. And the strategy that protected the institution for so long, never explain, never complain, give nothing away, wait for the storm to pass. That strategy has finally, catastrophically, run out of time. Social media does not wait for the storm to pass. Independent journalists and Substack writers and podcast hosts do not rely on palace press teams for their information. The internet has a longer memory than any institution has ever had to contend with before. And the public, slowly, steadily, irrevocably, is no longer willing to simply accept that some things are above questioning. If the king had acted earlier, if he had been ruthless, not merely performative, not merely issuing statements that sounded strong while privately ensuring nothing actually changed, if he had truly confronted this, cut Andrew off completely, cooperated fully with every investigation, opened every file, answered every question, then perhaps this would be a story about one bad prince, a painful chapter, a cautionary tale. Instead, it is becoming a story about an institution, about a system that protected itself at the expense of truth, at the expense of the women who were harmed, at the expense of the public's right to know what was being done in their name. The moral authority is gone, not damaged, gone, spent over 25 years of choices made quietly in private to prioritize the family over the truth.
To somehow excuse this behaviour by silence, I don't think it's going to wash any longer.
It's interesting that we are sometimes told that it's William, Prince of Wales, who is pushing the anti-Andrew agenda in the royal family. But isn't Camilla also quite significant here?
Yes, I understand that she is, and Catherine as well. I mean, I think they, as outsiders, they can see the reputational damage, and it's William, in a sense, who's going to have to inherit this problem. You know, the Queen passed the buck to the King, and in some ways, you know, the King has to address it. This is, you know, his legacy will be how he deals with Andrew, and it may be he has to bite the bullet and accept some of the blame and to say there's been a bit of a cover-up. And to leave the slate clean for William. Otherwise, the problem just continues from one reign to the other.
Well, Giselle Pellico was on the programme yesterday, and she so terrifically proud of the fact that Camilla had reached out to her, had had sent her a letter of support. I think Camilla has been out wearing a badge that is a Giselle Pellico supporter badge. There's no way that the Queen can want to be associated with Giselle Pellico.
A Me Too moment for the monarchy. Think about what those words actually mean. Think about what Me Too represented when it erupted, not just as a hashtag, not just as a cultural moment, but as the point at which a pattern of behavior that had been enabled, protected, ignored, and excused by powerful institutions for generations finally became impossible to contain. That is where the British monarchy stands right now. Not at a crossroads, because a crossroads implies a genuine choice between two equal paths. This is more like a cliff edge. The choice is not which direction to walk. The choice is whether to acknowledge the ground has run out before you step off it. The excuses are exhausted. The narrative management is failing. The witnesses are being found, one by one, despite every effort to keep them silent. The files are being released, piece by piece, despite every exemption and legal maneuver deployed to prevent it. And at the center of all of it sits a man in a house on the Sandringham estate, watching flight simulation games on a screen, walking his dogs in the early morning when there are fewer cameras, talking to lawyers on a phone that costs more than most people earn in a month. A man who was once called Randy Andy in the tabloids, the Playboy Prince, the charming rogue, the irresistible Duke, who built an identity on being larger than life, on being the one who could walk into any room and own it. Now, according to Looney, he is lonely, isolated, abandoned by most of the friends who used to fill those rooms. A man who never really learned to trust anyone, going all the way back to prep school, where people he confided in sold stories about him to the press. A man whose childhood had no real boundaries, whose family watched him become what he became and chose, repeatedly, to say nothing. It is, in its way, a genuinely tragic story. And it is possible, just barely possible, to feel the faintest trace of something like sympathy, even for him. But that sympathy evaporates the moment you remember the women. The moment you remember what was done to them. The moment you remember that they are still waiting, still hoping, still fighting to be heard in a system that has spent 25 years trying to make sure they are not. Andrew Looney did not set out to be a problem for the establishment. He is, by his own description, a former Conservative Party candidate who served in the Navy. A historian who has debated publicly in favor of the monarchy. A man who describes himself as an honest friend to the institution, the kind of friend who tells you the truth precisely because he believes the relationship is worth saving. He lost friendships writing this book, lost invitations, had legal threats arrive before the first copy was even printed, and he kept going, because history requires it. Because if the people whose job it is to record the truth allow the powerful to write their own version unchallenged, then the truth does not survive. It gets replaced by myth, by curated narrative, by the version of events that protects the people who have the most to lose from the real one. The Epstein files are still being released. Not all of them, not even most of them. Sarah Ferguson is still missing. The guest lists from Andrew's official trips are still locked behind government exemptions. The Department of Justice is still, as Looney puts it, generously described as dragging its feet. The co-conspirators have done their quiet deals. The witnesses are living carefully. The palace is issuing careful statements and hoping the news cycle moves on. But something has shifted, something irreversible. The Epstein releases didn't just confirm what was already suspected, they lit a fire under a story that powerful people had spent a generation trying to smother. And fires, once they reach a certain point, do not care about damage control. This story is not over. Not for the women still waiting for justice. Not for the journalists still digging. Not for the historians who believe that truth, however inconvenient, however uncomfortable, however damaging to the people who prefer the myth, deserves to be told. The monarchy has a choice. It has always had a choice. Accountability or protection, truth or silence. The 21st century, or the long, slow, dignified decline of an institution that ran out of moral authority and refused to notice until it was too late. Because you can survive scandal. Institutions have survived far worse than one corrupt prince. What you cannot survive, what no institution, however ancient, however beloved, has ever survived, is the moment when the people you were supposed to serve realize, beyond any doubt, that you were never really serving them at all. That moment is here. And the only thing more dangerous than a cover-up is a cover-up that succeeds.